Wreck-It Ralph movie review. This is part of a series of videos I've been doing on this channel where I take a review I wrote years ago on my weblog and try and change that written review into a video review for whatever that may or may not be worth. If you're interested in checking out the written review on which this video is based on, I'll link to it down below. The movie came out 10 years ago in 2012, I believe. I got around to watching it 1 year later in April 2013 and wrote the review at that time. I'll link to it down below. So this is a kids movie, obviously. I think most people are familiar with this, right? Most people saw this movie when it came out. I know it's old news now. Nobody's talking about it now. But most people saw this when it came out, right? And me as well. I initially thought I might give this movie a pass because I don't, as a single man at the time without any kids, I didn't feel the need to see all those kids movies, except some of them can be quite entertaining. And this one was getting really good reviews. There was, in particular, there was a review in the AV Club, which I read all the time, and I'll link to that down below as well, which really praised this movie. But I think a lot of the general chatter was that this movie was very good, deconstructing the roles of heroes and villains in video games and all these nostalgic references to video games from the 1980s and 90s, somebody of my generation, references to our past. There were good reviews of this and negative reviews, but it seemed to be mostly good reviews, and the good reviews were praising this movie for doing a lot of clever things with the narrative. So I went in with high expectations, and I was completely disappointed, and wrote a pretty negative review of this movie. But to be fair, I think that negative review was influenced by the high expectations I had. And also, I'm an adult reviewing a kids movie. I think as a kids movie, it's perfectly fine. It's perfectly serviceable for a kids movie. Problem comes when it gets praised too much, because I don't think it holds up to that praise. And when you try and take it apart, because I don't think it really makes a lot of sense when you take it apart. And you could say, well, don't try and take it apart. It's a kids movie, and fair enough. But then don't praise it too much either. If you're going to praise it too much, I'm going to try and take it apart. So, the basic conceit of this movie is it's about the symbiotic relationship between a hero and a villain, in a video game in this case. It brings to mind another kids movie, also about the symbiotic relationship between a hero and a villain, which came out just a couple years earlier. Of course, I'm talking about Megamind, which came out in 2010, just right before this movie. It feels like it came out just right before this movie. And Megamind, I've also reviewed that on this channel, and tried to remember to link that down below. But Megamind was kind of clever. The basic conceit behind Megamind is it's a comic book villain who actually gets what he wants. He destroys the hero. And then he finds out that because he's destroyed the hero, he's got nothing to live for anymore. And his entire existence is defined by his symbiotic relationship with the hero. Now, on the one hand, because comic book villains don't really exist in real life, this isn't saying anything profound about the human condition. But on the other hand, it's a relatively clever deconstruction about the archetypes in comic book hero stories. You have this villain who's just so bent on destroying the hero, often to the point that that's their only defining motivation or character trait. But it shows that they actually can't destroy the hero. They need the hero because their only defining character trait is their opposition to the hero. It was clever enough for what it was. Wreck-It Ralph is doing something maybe a little bit in reverse. It's also from the villain's perspective, just like Megamind. But in Wreck-It Ralph, I guess the point that's being made is that it's the hero who needs the villain, who needs the bad guy. No bad guy, no hero, no video game. Except, well, sorry. First of all, I think, I don't know how much this affected other people, but I had the feeling that Wreck-It Ralph was a little bit of a retread of themes I'd already seen before. I don't know if that's because Hollywood does everything in packs, everyone copies everyone else, or if it was just an obvious idea waiting around to get made. But was because it came out so closely on the heels of Megamind, I was less impressed by it. But secondly, it doesn't entirely make sense in Wreck-It Ralph, because in Wreck-It Ralph, the heroes and the villains aren't actually what do I want to say? The heroes and the villains aren't actually their real identity. In Wreck-It Ralph, everybody seems to be aware that everybody else is playing a part. So Wreck-It Ralph only tries to destroy the buildings when a kid puts a quarter into the machine. And then when the arcade is closed for the night and all the kids go home, then Wreck-It Ralph is not destroying the buildings. He just rests and waits till the next day. And there's this odd thing going on where, on the one hand, everybody seems to be aware that the whole thing is kind of like a stage play, and they're all actors playing roles in this video game. And then there's another thing going on where nobody seems to be aware of this at all. So, Wreck-It Ralph is going through the station. There's a station where all the video game characters converge, and characters are running in terror from him. There's a bad guy support group. Or there's this prejudice shown against Wreck-It Ralph by the citizens of Nicetown, which is a video game he's in. But it didn't really make sense to me what was going on. This whole thing between the role the characters were playing in the video game and the actual characters themselves just never really seemed to make sense to me. There was that other character. What was her name? Sergeant Calhoun, played by Jane Lynch. She's got a tragic backstory programmed into her character, where her true love was eaten up by bugs on their wedding, at their wedding, or something like that. And it's something that has really traumatized her, despite the fact that she and everybody else seem to be aware that this never actually happened. This is just a backstory that the programmers have decided for her character. So, I don't know. It doesn't make sense. It's a kid's movie. I know. So the basic premise seems repetitive for Megamind. The basic premise doesn't even entirely make sense. And then I just didn't find it that funny. And now, granted, this is kind of a personal bias. I know other adults my age, who found it funny, but I thought all the one-liners were just really stupid, and not funny at all. And I'm sure they were great for kids. So, if you've got a 7-year-old sense of humor or something like that, and again, it's a kid's movie, so fair enough. But I was a little bit confused to see it get such positive reviews from adults. all that being said, the references to nostalgic video games from the 80s and 90s, I'm right in the target demographic for that, so that got me. Uh, there were scenes in the video game station where all the characters congregate, where there was just tons of characters in the background. It's the one thing that made me regret that I didn't see this in the theater, because seeing it on my small screen television was a little bit difficult to appreciate all those characters. Yeah, it's one of the things with theatrical releases, huh? Is it's only in the theaters for a few months, and then it's never in the theaters ever again, right? I mean, what are the chances that you'd ever get a chance to see Wreck-It Ralph on the big screen? So it's going to be forever on the small screen with maybe all these details that aren't fully appreciated. That's the way a lot of theatrical releases go. But then about, I don't know, halfway through the movie or something like that, Wreck-It Ralph gets stuck in Candyland, which is a racing car game based on a candy world, in which, I don't know, it's kind of vaguely based on Mario Kart or some of those other racing games. But it's from that point on, the callbacks and references to real video games are out. We're left with the character of Vanellope, who, again, I'm going to complain about this. I did not find her funny at all. I thought that her character was just cutesy, and all the humor of her character was intended to be drawn from, oh, look how funny it is, how cutesy she is. And I just thought that fell flat. On the other hand, there's another plot going on where Fix-It Felix from the Wreck-It Ralph video game is partnering up with Sergeant Calhoun from a shooting game. Sergeant Calhoun is played by Jane Lynch, who was Coach Sylvester from Glee. Now, I was never a huge fan of Glee, but round about the time that this movie came out, Glee was on TV all the time. At least where I was. I was out in Cambodia at the time, and there were limited English TV channels on my TV. There were a couple that came out from Singapore. Star World was one of them, which just had Glee on all the time. I think that was not true to a lesser extent in the States, where Glee was just hard to escape. And Jane Lynch, or Coach Sylvester, just had this very distinctive voice, to the point that wherever she opened up her mouth, I could not. It took me right out of the movie. I could not picture her as Sergeant Calhoun. I just kept picturing her as Coach Sylvester, who I did not picture in that role of the romantic lead. Well, I'm talking about the voice acting, though. There was something that I thought was a clever callback, maybe, is the villain is doing an impression of the Mad Hatter from Alice in Wonderland. The Mad Hatter was originally played, I think, by a guy named Ed Wynn, who is long dead now. But he not only did he do the Mad Hatter, he also had some bit roles in a number of Disney movies, I think from the 50s and 60s. I grew up on the Disney Channel as a kid, so I saw most of those movies, all of those movies. So that got bonus nostalgic points from me. It's not Ed Wynn actually doing it. I think it's Alan Tudyk, was that his name? But he's doing a perfect impression of Ed Wynn. Arguably, it takes you out of the movie maybe a little bit, but it was a nice callback to Disney lore, I thought. The ending of the movie is cliche. As a friend of mine said, what did he say? Let me find his comments here. I thought the movie started off with some deliciously subversive potential, as did Megamind. Ralph wants desperately to be acknowledged as necessary and valuable. No Ralph, no hero, no video game. There's material there for some genuine mischief. But, as with Megamind, the writers default to the no-brainer template. Introduce a villain that is truly bad and unequivocally needs to be destroyed. Ho-hum, business as usual. Yeah, I'd agree with that for the most part. He's being a little bit more generous than I am in that after Megamind came out, I've got limited interest in seeing this premise done again. But there is some potential there for some genuine mischief, as he says, and then they just ignore it, and it just becomes a destroy the bad guy type movie. There were a number of other things that didn't make sense to me. So at one point, Sour Bill says of the Turbo character, he says, he, Turbo, this is the bad guy, will do anything to keep her racing. She's referring to Vanellope the glitch. Because if she crosses the finish line, the game will reset and she won't be a glitch anymore. Why? I don't know. It's never explained, but yeah, okay, it's a kid's movie. You give it space. They get a certain amount of givens that they're allowed to set up. But then, did I miss something? She does cross the finish line, and the game doesn't reset. She is still a glitch. She learns how to control the glitch, and that becomes her power. But yeah, but that's it. I don't know. I also didn't understand why Turbo, the bad guy, was the only one who can access the video game code, or who can change the video game code. It didn't make sense to me. Let's see. What else have I got down here? I think that's pretty much it. Yeah, that's my review. So if I missed something, let me know in the comments. It's possible that there was a plot point that just went over my head, but as far as I can tell, those are the things that didn't make sense to me.